Imagine being the CEO of the entire known world. I mean, you command massive armies, you hold the power of life and death over millions of people. But right now, your empire is being utterly ravaged by this mysterious apocalyptic plague.
Yeah, and the rivers are flooding.
Right, the rivers are flooding, they're destroying your capital city, and to top it all off, your absolute best friend, your top general, just committed high treason and declared himself emperor. What do you do?
It's a nightmare scenario.
Totally. Well, if you are Marcus Aurelius, you retreat to a freezing military tent, you pull out a private diary, and you write a detailed entry about the importance of not being a grammar snob.
It sounds totally absurd when you frame it that way, but that is the exact paradox of the man. We are talking about someone who held absolute, unquestioned power, yet he spent his nights policing his own mind with this ruthless precision.
And that paradox is exactly why we're here. Normally, when we talk about ancient history, it feels incredibly abstract, right?
Oh, yeah, like it's trapped in a textbook.
Exactly. Just dates and battles safely tucked behind museum glass. But today, we're shattering that glass. Welcome to today's deep dive. And our landscape today is incredibly tactile. We are opening up a physical time machine today. It's a vintage 1910 red letter library edition of the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius.
Oh, such a beautiful addition too.
It really is. This one is translated by George Long, and it features a brilliant introduction by W.L. Courtney.
You know, the physical book itself tells a story before you even read a single word. You open the cover and you're greeted by these old University of Illinois library plates. It specifically notes it's from the Charles A. and Charles N. Dennison bequest.
Yeah, you can almost smell the old paper just looking at it.
You really can. And there is this striking classic portrait bust of the bearded emperor himself. He's just staring right back at you from the page. It sets a very grounding tone for us today.
It definitely does. Because the mission of this deep dive isn't to give you a dry history lesson on Roman supply chains. The goal is to uncover how this man used a private diary to maintain his sanity through plagues and betrayals and endless wars.
And to extract the specific nuggets of knowledge that can actually help you manage your own daily chaos right now.
Okay, let's unpack this, because to understand Marcus, we have to look at the psychological foundation he built for himself. We're diving into Book on the Meditations, and immediately there is just a glaring difference between him and modern leaders.
Oh, a massive difference. I mean, think about modern politicians or CEOs today. When they write memoirs. They are performing for an audience, right?
Yeah, they're shaping their legacy.
Exactly. They're justifying their mistakes. But Marcus wrote these 12 books purely for himself. It was a private psychological toolkit. He never, ever intended for us to read a single word of it.
Which makes Book so fascinating, because it's essentially a catalog of debts. He is listing the virtues he learned from his family and his teachers. Like, he credits his mother with teaching him to live simply, far from the habits of the rich.
Right.
And he notes that she taught him to abstain not just from evil deeds, or even from evil thoughts.
And that is where the internal discipline really starts. He's recognizing that the action begins with the thought. From his tutor Diognetus, he learned to embrace strict Grecian discipline. He was literally sleeping on a hard wooden plank bed, covered only with an animal skin.
Even though he lived in a palace.
Right, even though he had access to, palace feather beds. And from his adoptive father, the Emperor Antoninus Pius, he learned mildness and, more importantly, the ability to completely ignore vain honors and flattery.
But intertwined with these big, noble virtues, he includes this highly relatable, almost hyper-specific advice to himself. Like, he notes that from Alexander the Grammarian, he learned how to correct people's grammar.
Which is such a funny thing for an emperor to worry about.
I know. He tells himself to do it dexterously and gently, not by chiding or embarrassing the person, but by seamlessly introducing the right word into the conversation so they don't feel stupid.
That's real emotional intelligence right there.
It really is. And from Alexander the Platonic, he learned never to casually use the excuse, I have no leisure, or, I'm too busy, to avoid his duties to family and friends.
Which is an excuse we all use constantly today.
Constantly. I mean, it reads like a modern mindfulness gratitude journal. But wait, I have to push back here for a second.
Sure.
Isn't this just a convenient philosophical excuse for being aloof? This is a man who could literally have anything he wanted. Why does the CEO of the Roman Empire actually care about a misplaced verb tense at a dinner party?
It's a completely fair question, but it's not about being polite or having good social etiquette. It comes down to the absolute core of Stoic self-governance. It's about, microdiscipline.
The microdiscipline.
Yeah, think about it in modern terms. If you let a petty annoyance, like a passive-aggressive email or someone cutting you off in traffic, if you let that agitate you and ruin your morning, you have just surrendered your mind to a stranger.
Oh, wow.
You've allowed external circumstances to dictate your internal state.
So if he can't control his reaction to a minor grammatical error at a party, he's definitely not going to be able to control his reaction when a foreign army invades.
Exactly that. The Stoic goal is absolute sovereignty over your own mind. If you win the micro battles, you are training the mental muscles required for the macro battles.
Okay, we see him mastering his mind over an annoying grammar mistake, sure. But that's incredibly low stakes. The real question is, how did this mental training actually hold up when his empire literally started falling apart? Because, it's easy to be a philosopher in a cozy gratitude journal.
Oh, yeah. Theory crashed into reality almost immediately. The crucible of his reign began right at his ascension in 161 AD. The universe just threw everything at him all at once.
It was a cascade of absolute civilization-level disasters. First, the Tiber River violently floods. It sweeps away massive sections of Rome and destroys the granaries. That triggers a horrific famine.
And then come the earthquakes and the fires.
Right. And while the citizens are starving in the rubble, there is an uprising by the Parthians, which was this highly aggressive empire that threatened Rome's eastern borders.
And as if managing those external threats wasn't enough, Marcus had an internal management nightmare. He had a co-emperor, his adoptive brother Verus.
Right there.
By all historical accounts, Verus was a highly sensual, wildly incompetent man. Marcus sends him east to fight the Parthians, and Verus spends most of his time just indulging in luxury while his generals do the actual fighting. He severely imperiled the Roman cause.
But the worst part is what happens when Verus and his army finally return. They brought back the Antonine Plague from the east.
Yeah, that was devastating.
This pestilence totally ravaged Italy. We are talking about people dropping dead in the streets, the economy grinding to an absolute halt, the army being decimated. People literally thought it was the end of the world.
It must have felt like it.
And a quick side note on the political intrigue here. Rumors flew that Marcus had Verus poisoned to get rid of him. But W.L. Courtney's analysis makes it very clear Marcus ignored those whispers. Verus almost certainly died of that very plague.
So now Marcus is the undisputed master of a crippled empire, and his troubles don't stop there. For almost 3 years, this highly educated, philosophical man, a guy who loves books and quiet reflection, is stuck in a freezing, muddy military camp at Carnuntum on the Danube River.
Just miserable conditions.
Beyond miserable. He is fighting off relentless, brutal Germanic tribes, specifically the Quadi and the Marcomanni.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because this freezing, blood-soaked camp is where he was actually writing the Meditations. Try to picture the sensory contrast here. Outside his tent, men are dying, it's freezing cold, the future of Western civilization is hanging by a thread.
Yeah.
And inside, by candlelight, he is calmly writing to himself about the importance of being patient with annoying people.
What's fascinating here is how his philosophy directly dictated his actions in these extreme environments. It wasn't just abstract thought for him, it was an operational manual. Take the famous miracle of the Thundering Legion in the 174 AD.
Oh, I love this story.
It's wild. A Roman army was trapped in a ravine, completely surrounded by the Quadi. They were cut off from water, dying of thirst, baking in the heat, just waiting to be slaughtered.
And suddenly, this massive freak thunderstorm rolls in. It dumps rain to save the Romans, but it throws lightning and horrific hail down on their enemies. It totally terrified them and allowed the Romans to win.
And the interpretations of this event tell you everything about the era. The pagans credited their gods, specifically Jupiter. The Christian soldiers in the ranks credited their prayers. W.L. Courtney notes wryly that the legion was likely called the Thundering Legion because they already had lightning bolts painted on their shields rather than the actual lightning itself. But the broader point is, Marcus lived in a world where everyone viewed chaos through a lens of magic or divine intervention or just blind panic.
But he didn't.
No, he stayed totally grounded.
And nothing tested that grounding more than the revolt of his top general, Avidius Cassius. This was a man Marcus deeply trusted, who used a rumor of Marcus's death to suddenly proclaim himself emperor in Asia. He stole a massive chunk of the empire.
This is the ultimate test of character. I mean, how does a philosopher king handle the deepest personal and political treason?
Well, when Cassius was assassinated by his own people just 3 months later, Marcus didn't throw a parade. He didn't thank the assassins or put Cassius's head on a spike. He actually pardoned Cassius's entire family.
Which is unheard of for a Roman emperor.
Totally unheard of. And here's the ultimate flex of self-control. When the rebels' private correspondence was brought to him, these are letters full of the names of every senator and official who conspired against him in Rome. Marcus burned the letters without even reading them.
He fundamentally refused to let that paranoia and poison into his mind, because if he reads those names, he has to act on them. He has to become a tyrant.
Wow, yeah.
If we connect this back to his Bookeye journal, remember he credited his tutor Rusticus with teaching him to be easily pacified and reconciled the moment an offender shows readiness. He wasn't just acting on a whim here. He was executing a highly specific psychological framework.
Okay, so he clearly had this, Stoic operating system that allowed him to override his human impulses. But how does that system actually function under the hood? What are the mechanics of this philosophy?
To understand how Stoicism actually works, we have to grasp their core concept of living conformably to nature. Now, when they say nature, they don't mean, hiking in the woods.
Right.
They believe the universe is divided into two distinct parts: the raw material and the rational informing intelligence that organizes it.
So they believe the universe is governed by a divine rational order. There's a logic to everything, even if we can't see it ourselves.
Precisely. And since humans are a part of that rational universe, our highest calling is to let our reason rule over our physical passions and our sensory inputs. Because, our senses constantly deceive us.
How do you mean?
Think about it. Your eyes tell you that the sun revolves around the earth. Your eyes tell you that dew falls from the sky when actually it condenses and rises from the ground. It is our reason that steps in and corrects those sensory illusions.
I see. So in that same way, reason steps in to correct our illusions about what actually matters in everyday life. He spends a lot of time talking about indifferent things, right? Wealth, reputation, sickness, even death. He categorizes these as external material conditions.
Right. If you get laid off from your job tomorrow, or your reputation takes a massive hit on social media, your immediate sensory and emotional reaction is panic. Your brain says, this is a disaster.
Yeah, obviously.
But your reason steps in and says, wait, these things are outside of my direct control. My moral character is untouched. Therefore, I shouldn't let this external event disrupt my inner peace.
Okay, but this brings us to a major historical contradiction. We just established that Marcus Aurelius is a man who forgives treason, he burns his enemies' letters, and he uses reason to stay calm. So as a listener, you would naturally assume he was universally merciful.
Right.
But historically, that's just not true. And this is where his philosophy hits a very dark contradiction regarding the early Christian movement. During his reign, there were severe state-sanctioned persecutions of Christians. Most notably, the martyrdom of Polycarp around 167 AD and the horrific trials at Lyons in 177 AD, where Christians were brutally tortured and executed in the public arena.
It is a profoundly jarring reality. Now, looking at this through a purely historical lens, completely setting aside our modern religious, ethical, or moral judgments, and just strictly relying on W.L. Courtney's historical analysis, we have to look at how the Roman state actually viewed these early Christians to understand how this happened.
Because I'm struggling with this. Wait, how does a gentle philosopher who burns his enemies' letters unread sanction torture in an arena?
It really comes down to the Stoic view of social duty and the Roman concept of state survival. To the Romans and to Marcus, maintaining the stability of the state was the absolute highest moral obligation. The empire was constantly on the brink of collapse from plagues and invasions. The glue holding it all together was the Roman civic religion.
Okay.
Courtney's analysis explains that the Roman establishment didn't view Christians as just another religious sect. They viewed them as religious anarchists.
Because they refused to participate in the state rituals.
Exactly. To a Roman, refusing to sacrifice to the gods wasn't just a personal choice. It was an act of treason that could anger the gods and bring more plagues and floods down on the city. And Courtney points out that early Christian communities were often militant and polemical.
Right. They weren't just keeping to themselves.
No, they wouldn't just quietly cultivate their faith in private. They were actively trying to dismantle the established Roman paganism.
So they were threatening the established orthodoxy. And the ordinary Roman citizens actually held a violent hatred toward Christians. They blamed them for the famines and the earthquakes, which forced the hands of the local governors. Courtney uses this phrase, harassed authority, to describe the imperial government just trying to keep the chaotic machinery of the state running.
It was a clash of fundamental operating systems. Christianity appealed to the heart, prioritizing love, emotion, and self-sacrifice for others. Stoicism, as Marcus practiced it, appealed to the head. It was about cold rationality, doing your duty, and preserving the rational order of the state above all else.
That makes sense.
In his entire private diary, Marcus only mentions Christians once, and he contemptuously calls them obstinate.
Because in his mind, they were letting irrational, emotional passion disrupt the universal harmony. They were choosing martyrdom over civic duty, and his Stoic brain simply couldn't compute it.
Yeah, he viewed it as mere theatrical defiance, which completely violated his core belief in rational duty.
This raises a really important question, though. Stoicism demands this strict, cold rationality at all times. But Marcus wasn't a robot. He was a human being. He was aging, his friends were dying, his children were dying, and his life's work, the empire, was crumbling around him. Did this icy philosophical armor ever crack under the pressure?
It definitely did. And honestly, that vulnerability is what makes him so compelling to read today. The 19th century critic Matthew Arnold noted a certain wistfulness in Marcus's writing. Courtney interprets this wistfulness as moments of deep, profound uncertainty actually seeping into the diary.
You can really see it in Book 7. He has this moment of existential wavering. He essentially asks himself, is the universe actually guided by a divine reason and providence? Or is it all just a fortuitous concourse of atoms?
Right.
Are we just automated puppets getting thrown around blindly by chance and chaos?
He usually defaults to trusting in divine reason, but those moments of doubt absolutely creep in. You also see his vulnerability when he discusses the Stoic view on suicide.
Right, because Stoics generally believe you had a duty to weigh out your useful life patiently. You don't get to just quit because it's hard. But they did have this philosophical escape hatch. Marcus writes, "The house is smoky and I quit it."
It's a powerful image.
Meaning, if the conditions of life become so intolerable, or if your mind degrades to the point where you can no longer exercise your reason, you actually have the moral right to walk out the door.
But what's really telling is how rarely he advocates for that escape hatch. He was far more focused on simply demystifying natural death. In books X and 12, he repeatedly breaks down what death actually is just to strip away the fear of it.
Just analyzing it mechanically.
Exactly. To him, death is no more formidable than birth. It's just the natural dispersion of elements that will eventually reaggregate into something else in the universe.
He uses this absolutely beautiful metaphor that I just haven't been able to stop thinking about. He compares a man dying to an actor being dismissed from the stage by the praetor, the magistrate who hired him. The actor protests the dismissal, saying, "But I have not finished the 5 acts, but only 3.
And the praetor responds, "In life, the 3 acts are the whole drama. Depart then satisfied, for he also who releases thee is satisfied."
So what does this all mean? Let's say he's right, and death is just a meaningless reshuffling of atoms, and our time on stage can be cut short at any random moment by a plague or an assassin. If none of it lasts, why did he work so relentlessly hard for the Roman people? Why not just check out, move to a palace on the coast, and enjoy the luxury of being emperor while the world burns?
If we connect this to the bigger picture of his philosophy, it's really about the intrinsic nature of doing good. For Marcus, goodness is never on the lookout for a reward. It doesn't need the promise of an afterlife, and it certainly doesn't need applause or a legacy. He writes that a human being does good simply because it is the natural work of a human being.
He compares it to a vine producing grapes, or a bee making honey, or a dog tracking game. When a vine produces a grape, it doesn't call out for everyone to come and look at what it achieved. It doesn't ask for a medal. It just goes on to produce the next grape in season.
Because that is exactly what a vine is meant to do. And what a human is meant to do, according to his rational framework, is to cooperate, to act justly, and to serve the social whole. Even if the universe is just a random concourse of atoms, doing your duty to your fellow humans is the only way to find inner tranquility in the present moment.
Depart, then satisfied. That image of the vine and the actor bowing out gracefully after 3 acts, it just strips away so much of the modern anxiety we carry around today about our legacy, our achievements, or, how many acts we get to play.
It forces you to stop looking at the horizon and look at your immediate actions. Are you doing the work of a human being right now, in this exact moment, regardless of the outcome?
And that really brings us full circle on this incredible journey. We started with a privileged boy in Rome, actively learning to sleep on a hard wooden plank to discipline his mind. And we followed him as he became the emperor, surviving massive floods, devastating plagues, and the ultimate betrayal of his top general.
And he survived all of it, not by lashing out, but by retreating into what he called the citadel of his own soul.
All while leaving behind a private diary that, remember, was never meant for us. He wasn't performing for history. But by simply trying to coach himself through the darkness, he accidentally left humanity the ultimate guide to keeping your head when everything around you is falling apart.
It really is the ultimate proof that the challenges of the human mind, like fear, anxiety, dealing with difficult people, they haven't really changed in 2,000 years.
Which leaves us with something I really want you to mull over today as you go about your life. Imagine if you had to write your own book I tonight. If you sat down to document the specific people who shaped you, the distinct virtues you owe to them, and the hard mental rules you need to survive your own daily chaos, what would your meditations look like? And more importantly, if someone found your diary in a vintage bookshop 2,000 years from now, what would it say about you?
Would it show a mind that was easily agitated by the world, reacting to every slight? Or would it show a mind that had built its own citadel?
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. The history is written, but the way you apply it is entirely up to you. Until next time, we'll keep unpacking the past so you can navigate the present.